Okay, hello everybody. Now I have a very interesting podcast today. I'll just sort out my shit. It is called Family Court and the Scapegoating Paradox. Before I start this podcast, I want you all to subscribe, like and share, because it's growing authentically, and I've had one video that's had over 1,500 views, so I'm very, very pleased about that. I'm also doing a space on X next week, so if you look on my X my X page, you'll see that I've tweeted it, my invitation. It's not my space, it's an Irish space, and we are talking about this subject, the family courts. So okay, so right, I'm going to start the podcast. So, family court and the scapegoating paradox. There is something very important the public often doesn't understand about family courts. They are not criminal courts designed to determine guilt beyond reasonable doubt. They are welfare courts that make decisions on the balance of probabilities and about where a child should live. And sometimes when serious allegations arise but are never fully investigated by the criminal justice system, those allegations end up being examined in a very different kind of courtroom. The gap between the criminal justice system and the family courts is one of the most important structural questions in child protection today. What would you do if your child came to you and said that they'd been harmed? Most parents would do the same thing. They would report it. They would go to the police. They would go to the authorities. They would try to protect their child. But there is a question that very few people ever ask. What happens if the act of reporting abuse becomes the very pathway through which the reporting parent is removed from the child's life? That question sits at the heart of a paradox that exists inside family court systems. And it is a paradox that many members of the public simply do not understand. I don't even think I still understand it, to be honest. The difference between criminal courts and family courts, as I've said in earlier podcasts, criminal courts and family courts operate in fundamentally different ways. In a criminal court, the question is straightforward. Did a crime occur? Police investigate. Evidence is gathered. Witnesses are interviewed. Forensic examinations can be carried out. Then the case is passed to prosecutors who decide whether criminal charges should be brought. But family courts do not operate in that way. Family courts are not determining criminal guilt. Their central question is different. Where should a child live in order to protect their welfare? So we go on to the balance of probabilities, which I've explained in great detail in earlier podcasts. Family courts operate under the Children Act 1989. The legal standard applied is called the balance of probabilities. This means the court is deciding what is more likely than not. 51% versus 49%. That very narrow margin can determine where a child will live. This is not the same as a criminal court where guilt must be proven beyond reasonable doubt. Family courts are deciding risk and welfare, not criminal guilt. The structural programme. This creates a difficult situation in cases involving serious allegations. If a criminal investigation does not reach a prosecution decision, the issue may still appear in family court proceedings. But a parent reporting abuse does not have the powers of a police investigator. They cannot seize evidence, they cannot compel witnesses, they cannot conduct forensic examinations, they cannot execute search warrants. Yet, inside a family court hearing, they may find themselves expected to prove allegations that only the police have the legal powers to investigate. I have been through this system myself, and it was like everything, like you start with a team around you, and then as the case goes on, everybody just disappears, and you've been pushed forward, and they're saying, don't talk about abuse, you've got to prove it. And so we start all confident, and then we end like, I felt like I was pushed forward and just literally led to the slaughterhouse without putting any finer words on it. That way I couldn't win. The care order paradox. There is another structural paradox that many people never notice. A full care order can only be made if the court believes that a child has suffered or is at risk of suffering significant harm. So the order itself acknowledges risk. Yet, when a child ends up living with one parent under a care order arrangement, the public may assume that parent has been cleared. But a care order is not a declaration of innocence. It is evidence that the court believed risk existed. Not to mention, as soon as they get a care order, funds flow from central government, but maybe that has nothing to do with it. Maybe they're trying to protect the child. How reporting can lead to displacement. There is a sentence that helps explain this paradox clearly. The act of reporting abuse can become the pathway through which the reporting parent is displaced. When a report is made, multiple systems can become involved. Police, social services, family courts. If the criminal process does not fully resolve the allegation, the matter can move into family court, where decisions must still be made about where the child will live. I can remember the police saying to me, don't worry, the criminal court is beyond all reasonable doubt, so don't worry, because the family court, they don't have beyond all reasonable doubt. It's a balance of probabilities, which was supposed to make me feel assured or reassured that everything was going to be okay. But as you can see from my podcasts so far, the person that's reporting the abuse then has to be the person that proves without the powers of the police. Okay? So the attachment and children. There is also an important psychological reality that often goes unspoken. Children form deep bonds with their primary attachment figure, normally the people that have given birth to them, carried them for 9 months. This concept was explored extensively by psychologist John Bowlby. Attachment is not simply emotional, it is biological. When a child is separated from their primary attachment figure, their brain adapts in order to survive the new environment. Children often protect the relationship that remains available to them. They adapt to the parent they live with because their mind is trying to maintain stability. Media narratives. Another hold on a minute, phenomenon, sorry, I've been on a hair resource this morning, and another phenomenon can occur when family cases reach the public sphere. I know about this as people that have followed my case. It is sometimes called narrative capture. Complex situations are reduced into simple public stories. In those simplified narratives, one parent may be portrayed as the problem, while the other is framed as the victim. But family courts were not determining criminal guilt. They were making welfare decisions under uncertainty. Yet the public narrative may interpret the outcome as proof of guilt. From my situation, I was in 11 national papers as some crazy child coaching mad woman. But, as I've just explained, that there have been cases where fathers go on TV or in the press as the victim. But as you can see from my podcast, they were making welfare decisions under uncertainty, so nothing's certain. So that's why I feel vindicated. Not only that, there's another few things that happened in the meantime. So we go on to funding and structure. There is also a structural element within child protection systems. Once a child enters the care framework under a care order, the local authority gains legal authority to spend within the looked after child system. That spending includes reviews, oversight and services. The financial architecture of the system activates when a child becomes part of the care structure. In my case, taken away from me. Interim care order, full care order, in the care structure, well and truly 100%. The human cost. Legal systems operate through statutes and procedures, but families do not live through statutes. Families live through love, attachment and loss. Children grow up separated from parents they once loved deeply. Parents lose the daily presence of their children. Lives can be reshaped in ways that last decades. When a system designed to protect children separates them from a loving parent, the consequences are not just legal, they are lifelong. A question for adults who grew up in these systems. There is also something important that rarely happens in these debates. We rarely hear from the children who grew up inside these cases, because the voices we hear least in these debates are often the children who grew up inside the system, probably because they're too traumatized to speak. From my experience, if you are an adult today who experienced one of these cases as a child, your experience matters. How did it feel at the time? How do you understand it now? Your voice adds an important perspective that legal documents alone cannot capture. History shows that child protection crisis can look very different when children involved grow up and begin telling their own stories. The Cleveland case in the late 1980s is a well-known example. Years later, some individuals described traumatic removals. Others believed abuse had not been properly investigated. Those adult voices added new layers of understanding to the debate. I could probably do a podcast on the Cleveland case if you want to know more about it. A closing reflection. Family courts do not determine criminal guilt. They determine where a child should live. Yet, when the outcome becomes public, people often interpret it as if guilt had been proven. And that misunderstanding can shape how parents and children are viewed for the rest of their lives. For example, me, I have been known as some kind of criminal. People that know my story know that I breached a non-molestation order that was placed upon me because I took my daughter her winter coats, because when they took her from me, she didn't have any clothes. All the clothes were at our home. So I took her winter coats, and they said that that's very dangerous. It's a high risk situation, taking your child winter coats. So they put a non-molestation order on me, which I breached, and I got a 3-year prison sentence. But anyway, let me just keep to my script. Understanding that distinction is essential if we want to have an honest conversation about how child protection systems operate. Because behind every legal file is a child, and behind every child is a parent who loved them and loves them and still loves them. This is a message to children who disclosed abuse. When we talk about family court systems and investigations, we often focus on the adults. The lawyers, the judges, the police, and the parents. But there is one person at the centre of these cases whose voice is often lost over time. The child who first spoke up. If you were a child and you told someone something frightening that happened to you, you did exactly what a child is supposed to do. Children are meant to tell a trusted adult when something feels wrong. If systems, courts, or adults then made decisions that separated families, that responsibility belongs to those systems and those adults, not to the child who spoke. A child's disclosure is not a crime. A child telling the truth is not the reason a family breaks apart. No child should ever carry the belief that speaking up destroyed their family. If you were that child, please know this: you were never the problem. And sometimes the most important truth a child needs to hear as an adult is this: the person who tried to protect you never stopped loving you. So that is the end of the podcast today. I have to be careful when I'm doing my podcast, because I want my channel to stay on YouTube, and I don't want to throw allegations all over the place and words that might shut my channel down. So I do my podcasts in a way that are understandable without making anybody feel uncomfortable. Let's put it that way. So I hope you like this podcast. Can you please subscribe, share and like, and let's try and get more views on this very important information. Thank you so much.